Hello, girls, ladies, and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's talk. Thank you for your patience in me letting everyone in. My name's Pauline, and I'm just the host. Doing the greeting first of all, and then I'll run a question and answer session after George has spoken this evening. But before I hand over to George, I'm going to ask Jessie Meikle, who's the Education and International Convener, to introduce George himself. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening and welcome on behalf of the Education and International Committee to our Back Together talk. Tonight, we're very honoured to have George Anderson Mbe joining us. George was head of School of Horticulture at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh for nearly 38 years before his retirement. A year later, he went on to presenting Beechgrove Garden as it was known then. George is also on the Council of the Royal Horticultural Society, a member of Beautiful Scotland Judging Panel, and on the National Trust for Scotland Garden and Designed Landscaping Advisory Committee. His knowledge of plants is second to none. George lives in Joppa, Edinburgh, with his wife Jill. Lockdown presented many challenges for recording television programmes, including Beechgrove. But George and Jill rose to the challenge of recording and presenting the programme themselves from their garden. It gives me great pleasure now to hand over to George.
Thank you very much indeed, and we'll just go straight on to the screen so that you can see what there is. Now, Beechgrove, as we have possibly experienced, is a bit of a national treasure. And it's been on your screens for 42 years, I think it is now. And what I want to do this evening is to take you through some of the past history and then end up by looking at the way in which it has changed during lockdown. And we'll look at the number of presenters and things like that as we go through. The title, the talk which I used to give quite frequently was this one, which was called Both Sides of the Lens, because it's interesting that people see Beechgrove from the back of the camera. They see through the camera lens, but at the other side of the lens are all these presenters. And it's presented in a garden which is out at West Hill. It's not in Aberdeen itself, it's at West Hill, which is some distance out from Aberdeen. And this garden was created around about 25, 26, maybe more years ago from an old nursery which was owned by the City Council.
I've only got
so that
20 minutes anyway.
That has been changed, it has been landscaped, and we've ended up with this garden. Now, what's interesting about this garden is that it sits quite high up. And if you look at the date on the top of that slide, it says April 2012. That is what the weather was like in April 2012. The day before, Jim was there. There's Jim down in the bottom right-hand corner. And Jim McCall, the week before, had been standing in his shirt sleeves. And there it was, covered in snow the next week. Now that gives you some idea of the problems that we have, but it also gives you an idea that when we're growing in Aberdeen, there is no reason why people can't be able to grow anywhere else. Anyway, it's a team effort. There's the presenters, directors, producers, editors, people in the background who do sound and vision, and then there's the garden staff who look after the garden. The garden is around about 4 acres in size. There's a head gardener, and currently there are 3 volunteers that help to look after the garden and to maintain it. But when I started, the ones that were there were what we call the 3 musketeers, really. Jim McCall, there's Carol Baxter, and then the lady in the middle is Leslie Watson, who is married to Dougal Phillip, and they own New Hopetoun Garden Centre. Now, they were the 3 permanent presenters at that particular time, and I joined them 16 years ago and became one of the members then. If you notice, I look quite young there, but then so does everybody else. And then we were, and at that stage, we also had Carolyn Spray from Pentland Nurseries, and then this young stripling on the, what is your left-hand side, joined us. He, of course, we know is Chris Beardshaw, an absolutely brilliant horticulturalist, a tremendous garden designer, and a great fellow to have on the programme. So he came onto the programme, and that took it that stage further. At that point in time, we were commissioned by the BBC Scotland. It was Tern Television produced the programme at Beechgrove, and it was commissioned by the BBC. And we were commissioned to produce 26 programmes. So we ran from March, often right through until October, because we had a break in the middle, either for the golf, the Open, or there would be Olympics, or there'd be something else in the middle of the summer, and that gave us an extended period. So the programme normally ran right through until about October. Things changed, and Jim left the programme, or was about to leave the programme, and this young fellow joined us. This is Brian, who is the head gardener at Slug Pellets. So he joined us. And then more recently, we've got Kirsty, who works at the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, and she joined. And if I remember, she joined about 3-4 years ago, somewhere like that. So these were the team. And what would happen of a morning would be that we would arrive in the garden and we would have a meeting and we would discuss what was going to happen that day. Because please remember, there wasn't a script for this. There is no script. I'm not saying we make it up, but we have to speak off the cuff, and we have to deliver our lines as knowledgeably as we possibly can. And there was no person better than that, than Jim McCall. But you know, looking from the left-hand side right through to the right-hand side, we've got a cameraman, we've got myself there, and then we've got the lady in the middle with the long blonde hair. That is Gwyneth Hardy, who was the director of Tern Television, and she is the lady that we all have to bow down to, because she's the one that organises the whole programme. Jim, of course, in the middle, doesn't like this photograph because he's not supposed to be eating sausages. And then the fellow or the lady there is the head gardener at that time, and then the sound guru, Bob Barrow, who is there on the extreme right. So that was the group. Now, they're the ones that then organise it. And when you're doing the filming, this is what happens. You just see me, but I'm getting mic'd up, and there's the cameras, there's the people discussing what's to happen, there's the sound man and Jim sitting at the side. And if you make a mistake, Mr. McCall will be in there like, you know, like a whippet to tell you that you've got things wrong. But we all got on extremely well together. Now, this garden, which I said was about 4 acres in size, is divided up into various different portions. There is the area which is where we used to have trial beds, and where the paving slabs are in the front there, that is where we would have, or where I eventually created what was the small space garden. This was designed for people who had just a small space outside their kitchen window or at their back door where they wanted to grow 1 or 2 vegetables. And our idea at Beechgrove was that we would try and be as relevant as we possibly could to all the people who were just starting in horticulture, just starting to garden, who didn't know anything about it. And that is the raison d'etre for the programme. It was to let people know what to do. There's the major vegetable plot in the garden, and that over the years has changed position. This is it here with all the various vegetables in it. And the thing which is important about that is, not only did we show people how to grow vegetables well, but we showed them the pests and diseases that they had too. So if you had caterpillars on your cabbage, as we've got here, we would explain that. We would tell you how to sort it. We would tell you how to prevent it. Further down, we've got the village, or it's the glasshouse village. Looking over from these are the trial beds in the front there, next to the pyramid conifers, and then beyond it, the trial or the glasshouse village. And that's one where all the bedding plants are along the side in pots, and we have this wonderful display of material there. One of the areas which I was particularly involved in was the fruit. Somehow I've got the name of the lopper from Joppa. I don't know how this happened. I seem to always be seen with a pair of secateurs in my hand, but I was let loose in the fruit cage and was able to plant that up and to grow fruit in there. And we grew quite, you know, at Beechgrove we grew quite a lot of fruit. We grew apples and we grew plums and we grew red currants and blueberries. And they are still there. When I was up just this week, all these plants are still there. And although we had the period of lockdown, they have all survived, which is it's quite good to know. And inside, figs, growing figs, and we had peaches and we had grapes and all sorts of things. When I joined Beechgrove, and you can ask about that later on if you wish, but when I joined Beechgrove, one of the first tasks I was given was to develop the secret garden, which is this one here. And it was to recreate a little space in this area here. So what I did was I planted a whole group of plants in here, which would grow through one another. Because my idea of gardening is not to have any bare soil. And that should be your idea as well, where you don't have any bare soil and where your garden is one which is created from a layer of different plants which will establish themselves and grow through one another, and at the same time suppress all the weeds. So that is what it turned out like. So we've got a saxifrage, and we've got a pachysandra, we've got stachys at the front, and various other things. So all these things were growing through one another, and that's the idea. And that leads us on to this other project which we had within Beechgrove at that time, which was about problem corners. We invited people to write in, to phone in, to send us texts and whatever, and show us pictures of a problem corner in their garden, which they didn't have any idea of what to do. So we would then go out, we would get somewhere about 200 of these, and we had to go out around the country and work out which were going to be the best ones, because you would end up with various ones. The one on the top left there is a house in Glasgow where the people who'd moved into it decided that they wanted to own this property, so they just acted like vandals when they got in, and they cut everything down that was there. And then they thought, what are we going to do? And we went in and we tried to sort that out. The one on the top right is one which we did in Lithgow, where there was a small boy in the household who was interested in dinosaurs, and we created a dinosaur out of wood, branches and so forth up the side. So we went to these problem corners, and this was one of them, where the lady wanted to have a bed of plants which would give her colour all the year round. I'm sorry about the camera which is sticking up at the back, but the cameraman was just putting his camera way back in the car when he took the photograph. Now, this one interested me because I had carefully labelled all the plants for this lady. And immediately the filming was finished, she went across the whole of that border, lifted all the labels and threw them in the bin. And I thought, oh, but that was what she wanted. She didn't want labels. She didn't want something that looked like a dog's cemetery. She wanted a group of plants. And the only thing that was maybe wrong with what she did was that if something died, she didn't have any idea of what it was, so she wouldn't be able to order it again. But that was her problem. She was very happy with what had happened. We went to a garden in St Andrews where it was Cooper, where this was the case. The lady who bought the house thought that this conifer in the front was going to take over the garden and the house, so she wanted that out, and so we planted a lot of alpines into it. So we would go in and we would manage a garden for them. This lady, for example, down near Lockerbie, she had a garden which the builders had promised her a lawn. The poor lady had 2 new hips. Her husband had had a heart attack. This wasn't the sort of thing which they wanted at all. So we went in, and what we did was we established a gravel garden where she had some grasses. She didn't need to mow them though. She had a gravel garden which would look after itself. So it was about giving her an area which had low maintenance. We had an inquiry from this little girl's mother, who wanted to have a raised bed in order to grow vegetables. Now, this is young Rosa. I still know this young lady. She's a member of our church. And she was absolutely delightful. When asked what her favourite vegetable was, now remember at that time she was 3.5, 4 years old, she told everybody in the world that it was broccoli. That was her favourite, it was broccoli. So what we did for her was we created this raised bed, and they still grow vegetables in that. They had chickens in the background, and it was quite humorous because I asked her what the names of the chickens were, and she couldn't quite pronounce it, but her mother said, well, there's one called Tikka and the other one is called Masala. And I don't know if the wee lassie realised that they were possibly destined for the pot at some stage later on. Anyway, we also, as well as doing the problem corners, Beechgrove was involved in community gardens. This is where a community would write in and suggest that they wanted something to do. And it was their job, this community's job, with our help, to create this garden. But they had to get somebody at the end of each one of these tools. If they had forks and spades, you had to have somebody at the end of them to make sure that they worked. And we went to do this one. This was in Glasgow. It was at the back of a place where refugees were in Glasgow, and we created a garden there. And this was one of the situations where my eyes were opened. This young fellow, the coloured fellow at the end there, who was busy planting something, was an extremely reticent young man and very quiet and didn't want to speak to anybody. And I took him, with the help of Beechgrove, we took him to a garden which was created it was called the Concrete Garden. And we went to that garden, and it was a series of raised beds where local people from Maryhill were growing vegetables. And what I did was, I'm a bit of a rebel as far as this is concerned. I would be picking leaves off and nasturtium flowers and handing them to him and say, taste that, taste that. And all of a sudden, this young lad started to smile, and he started to tell me of all the vegetables that he grew back in Africa when he was there. And that was just the joy of horticulture, of communication, and it just showed me what barriers can be broken down with horticulture. Barriers which are to do with joining in, but barriers also which are to do with health. And this picture here is one which is of a garden which we created at Nine Wells Hospital in Dundee in order to help with the repatriation of patients after heart disorders and things like that, where these were the people that were involved. These were the folks that came along and helped to create that garden. So through the help of Beechgrove, which then became the catalyst for these things, these gardens were created. But we were always conscious of the fact that you had to go back to basics. You had to have things which people, they had to know about what to do. So I started filming, or they asked me to start filming from my allotment, which I'd been on for a number of years. So that was what we did. And I would grow crops which would have diseases and all sorts of things in them and get people excited about those. We grew beans. We did a trial of beans. I've never eaten so many French beans in all my life. And then we had to grow the bed of vegetables which are there, are vegetables which we tried, which were all those ones which you see on the shelves in supermarkets, and they're all called AGM vegetables. And AGM stands for Award of Garden Merit. And we tried those because these are supposed to be the best ones that you can possibly buy. So we were testing them one against the other. So that's what we were at. We grew broad beans. I think I've still got some of them in my freezer. And then I got involved in showing and trying to become involved and get other people involved in growing vegetables for shows. And we did that at Beechgrove, and these were some of the vegetables that we grew. And I have to say that the gardeners behind the scenes did a fantastic job in tending the crops, which us presenters had sown, and then they would look after them when we were not there. So they would look after them in the intervening weeks. And that was the produce. And it was entered into shows, and we did extremely well with it. We also went out to visit places. One of the places which I thoroughly enjoyed visiting, this was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, were the bulb fields in Holland. We went to Keukenhof, Jim McCall and I, and it was one of the most amazing trips I think that I've ever done, because I was with Jim, but also because it was something which it was an eye-opener. We went to the flower market at Aalsmeer, and these were the two cameramen that we had with us, George Leslie and Bob Barrow on sound. So they had a good time. We were there for about a week, and it had a fantastic time. We were involved in Gardening Scotland, where we would make ourselves, we would make a fool of ourselves in one way or another, just to join in the fun and help students and whoever else was there taking part. We visited gardens, people's individual gardens. This one was with the alpines, was a garden in Glenrothes, where the person there he was a microbiologist, but he preferred growing alpines. And some of these things would gain medals and tremendous awards because of his ability to grow. And that's what we wanted to do, show things on screen which would inspire others. One of the first things I did as a visit was to go and visit a strawberry nursery like this. We've seen these tunnels everywhere. You drive up and down the country and there's all these strawberry tunnels everywhere, and you think, what goes on in there? Well, I had to do an interview in this one with the fellow who owned it. And we would start at the bottom of that tunnel, and I had to eat a strawberry. What a hardship. And then we had to walk up, and I had to eat another strawberry. And all the time we had to be talking about it. Now, I can fluff my lines with the best of them. The fellow I was interviewing could fluff his lines with the best of them. We had to do this about 6 times, which means that's 12 very large strawberries that you have to eat. And by the time I got to the end, I could put a strawberry in my mouth, but I wasn't really able to swallow it. So it makes, it's all these things which go on, which are just wonderful memories. These images that you see now are of a garden that I visited up in Shetland, where the plant at the top was flowering in Shetland, and I'd seen that plant in the wild in Chile when it wasn't flowering. So there's the fact that it can flower in Chile and it can flower in Shetland just shows you how mild the climate in Shetland can be, even although it's that far north. We visited Lockerbie, we visited right down in Kirkcudbright, and this is the garden at the back of the house owned by Hornell, which used to be owned by Hornell, and it's an absolutely fabulous little garden. We visited gardens in Orkney. This is the garden of Caroline Critchlow in Orkney, with this central rill of water with its slabs on the side, and she said that the winds there were so strong that they lifted these slabs up and put them into the pond. Sometimes her trees would be found on the beach because they'd been blown out of the ground and blown over onto the beach at back. I visited the gardens at Inverness, Sir Charles Fraser and Lady Anne Fraser. So, I mean, I've been so lucky to go to lots of these places. What we did when we filmed at Beechgrove, you were scheduled to go out on a day to film. You filmed irrespective of the weather. As you can see there, it's not dry. With COVID in 2020, all of that changed. Jill and I filmed from sunny Joppa. And the reason we filmed from sunny Joppa was we could choose which day we filmed on. So in Joppa, it was always sunny. But we did the filming from home. And I have to say, for somebody who had never wanted to be a photographer, who with her phone and her little Snap Happy camera never ever took many photographs, you can see how she's developed. And the article which you have in your magazine outlines what she felt about the whole thing. And I have to say, I'm just extremely proud of what she did, because it's been absolutely outstanding. And her photography and her ability to keep up with an idiot like me trying to explain things about horticulture and gardening has been remarkable, and has been really applauded by those who do it professionally. And that's the camera which we used. So we had to film from our back garden. It's a suburban garden. Everybody thinks we've got acres and acres and acres of land. We don't. There's a bit at the back. That's it there, the top two pictures. There's the bit at the front, and there's the bit at the side. This is the small space garden, which you see all the time, or this year you saw all the time. There's the tomato house, or the little cold glass house with the tomatoes in it. It's just a little 6x8. It's not a huge glass house. But you see, my philosophy of not having any bare soil meant that everything is packed in. And we even had, we went to the allotment and filmed at the allotment. But the BBC wouldn't let us film there right at the outset. We were not allowed to go there at the beginning. We had to film everything at home in our own garden. But then eventually, as lockdown eased, we were allowed to get out and about. And eventually, we might be able to really get out and about. But we've grown some good crops, and it's been, I have to say, it's quite nerve-wracking knowing that next week you've got to do something from the allotment, or next week you've got to do something from home, and you have to prepare it. You have to be thinking. And really, over the last 2 summers, our life has revolved around the supply of material for Beechgrove. But it's all changed, hasn't it? We've now got this young whippersnapper here who is, I have to say, an absolute joy to work with. This is young Callum Clooney, who comes from Leven and is just magnificent when it comes to a wonderful presenter. From somebody who has never done anything like that in his life, he just comes over an absolute charm. And I'm sure that he has made you smile when you've watched the programme over the years. So thank you for what you've heard tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed it. We'll take questions and we'll just see exactly how things go from now on.
Thank you very much, George. That was wonderful. I love your pictures. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute then. How to do that, guys? I'll go to unmute.
Who's job?
The thing that I've just sent you that. And do you have a question, Anne?
They can hear us if we're speaking.
Yes, I watch the Beechgrove regularly, and I'm always so impressed by how everything seems to flower. I've got a camellia in my garden. It's about 3 to 4 years old, and it's showing no signs of flowering whatsoever. I presume it's probably needing fed. What sort of feeding should I give it if you think that is likely to be the problem?
Right. Can you remember where you got the camellia from?
It was a supermarket.
Right, okay. Supermarkets are wonderful places for picking up cheap plants. And there are 2 groups of plants which we can get from supermarkets which cause problems. One are fruit trees. And if we can go to a supermarket, we can go into Tesco's. Other stores are available, but we can go into Tesco's and people like that, and you can get a cheap apple tree at the door. And the thing is that you don't know what the rootstock is on that apple tree. So it'll likely grow into a monster. And if you put it in your wee garden, it just takes over. What happens with camellias is that what they sell you in the supermarket is Camellia japonica. And Camellia japonica has really glossy green leaves. And I'm sure that that's what yours has. Wonderful glossy green leaves, and it looks as though it should just burst into flower.
Yep.
But they don't. And the thing is that our climate is not really warm enough yet. But global warming, and I'm sure it will be, but it's because it's the wrong sort.
Right.
And if you're buying a camellia, the one that you should buy is a camellia which goes by the name of Camellia Cross Williamsii. But if it doesn't have Cross Williamsii on it, you can get Camellia Donation or Camellia, I think it's Inspiration or Anticipation, something like that. And those are the ones which will produce flowers for you. So go for the Cross Williamsii hybrids. And they're the ones which flower the best.
Right. Thank you very much. Yep.
Great. Thanks very much. Now, if anyone has any questions, if they could just either put their hand up physically, but that might take a while for me to get to you, or you can use the reaction and put your hand up through that.
Could ask something with my chart.
Is that Shirley talking?
Oh, sorry.
Hang on.
It was, but I would need to go and get my chart to let George see it. So give me a minute. I'll go and get it.
I'll get you.
Right.
I've got a question, George. It's not about plants, it's about gardens. What's your favourite garden that you've ever, like the best?
Oh, right, okay. Well, I mean, right. I'll go to one that, well, where do I start? I mean, my favourite garden is the one I'm in at the moment, really. It's like when people ask me what my favourite plant was, and I would say, well, it's the one that I'm dealing with now. In Scotland, I think my favourite gardens, I think I would have to say the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, wouldn't I? But I would go to Crathis Garden, Crathis in Aberdeenshire, at Crathis Castle. I think that is an absolutely outstanding garden, created by the Burnetts and laid out in such a way that there is colour there right throughout the whole year. Second best garden would be, you know, for real inspiration on what might be able to be grown in the future, would be Logan Botanic Garden. Tropical paradise, really, or subtropical paradise. If you've never been there, you should go.
Yeah.
And then if there was one other one, well, I really enjoyed going to the garden at Tressler up on Shetland. I thought that was just absolutely outstanding. Rosa Stepanova is the lady who owns that garden, and to me, it was an absolute inspiration that she was able to grow plants that far north.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really, really was outstanding.
Yeah.
Amazing.
God. Does anyone else have a? Oh, Shirley's got her hand up. Hang on a sec.
Right.
You're not.
I've got my chart now, George.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
What's
Yeah.
happening? I'm growing. This is my first year growing chard. I have Swiss chard and I have rainbow chard. And they're in a raised bed, but a lot of the leaves are looking like this. What is happening with them?
Right. Okay. I've got Swiss chard outside in the small space garden in raised beds, and it's done quite well. I think what's happened there is that's an attack by slugs and snails. I reckon that's snails. And if you were to put down some bait, you would find them. You know, that would sort them out. But we're not always that keen on putting down slug pellets because we've got pets and things like that around. So what I would just, unless you want to be seen going out at night with a torch and lingering about your garden and everybody talking about you, you know, going and collecting them. The other thing to do is to get a saucer of beer and something like that, and put that down, and that will attract them, and then you can pick them up, put them in your bucket, and get rid of them that way. That's one of the pests. Now the other thing is that, and you might have heard me, you might have seen me talking about it on Beechgrove. We feed the birds in our garden, and then, you know, we have a feeder up next to it's next to the raised beds that I have, and the little blighters, they go up to the feeder and they feed on the grain, and then they come down and sit on the edge of the raised beds, and they eat whatever they can reach. They're pecking at all the leaves that are there. So it could be bird damage, but you've got holes in the middle of the leaves, and I think that is very much the case that it's slugs and snails that are doing that. I'm sure that's what it is. So
Yeah.
out with the torch at night.
I do use, nobody will see me because I've no neighbours, but I do use beer traps sometimes. But
Right.
the thing that my birds have done, George, is I feed them sunflower seeds and they've planted them everywhere in the garden.
Yeah, I've got one that at the moment I've got there's a pot right outside the window, and there's a sunflower flowering its head off, and I never planted it. It's the great tits and the cold tits taking the seeds out the feeder and put them in, and I take them as a great gift and a wonderful joy. It's a surprise, absolute surprise when they come up. You know, I never sowed that.
Plant didn't grow.
Yeah.
The birds ones have grown.
That's it. Your ones don't grow, but the birds do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
trouble.
Sally. Thank you. I'm going to go now to it's Jim McCall, but I'm not sure it is Jim McCall. So
I saw that. I was a wee bit worried.
It's not Jim McCall. I'm on my husband's computer, and it's not the Jim McCall.
Right.
Oh. I would like to ask a question about club root.
Right.
I built some raised beds to try and address the club root problem I have in my vegetable garden, and I'm still having a big problem with club root. I've tried club root resistant varieties, tried putting lime on the soil, all my brassicas have been decimated. If I dug out all the soil in these raised beds and put new soil in, would that address the problem? And if so, how deep would I have to dig the soil down?
How much work do you want to do? That's the thing. You could dig the soil out, but I'm surprised that even when you grow the clubroot resistant varieties that you're not having much success, because my allotment is rife with clubroot, and I can grow the clubroot resistant varieties and they're okay. So the cabbage I grow is one called Killaxton, and
that's the one I grew this year. But
that grows well. I grow Crispus, which is the sprout, and that does well. And I have the cauliflower is one called Clapton. Now they all do well. But what I try to do when I'm preparing the bed for the brassicas is I will put down an extra dose of lime. I'll give it a fair 2 or 3 handfuls per square meter of lime. And that is important, because what happens is the spores of the clubroot remain in the soil for anything up to 7 years. So if you wanted to leave it fallow, you need to leave it fallow for 7 years before you were able to actually grow them clubroot again. That's a long time to wait for a cabbage, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the other thing is that so you can do that. Now you could also add a little bit of lime round the plant when you're planting it, a bit of extra, because if you can get the pH up to about 8 or 9, then the clubroot doesn't like that. It likes it down about 5, 4, and 3. It likes the slightly acid soil. So if you can get the pH up, that helps it. The other thing is, when you buy your plants, I don't know whether you get them. I mean, I get mine from DT Brown or Mr. Fothergill, and I buy in the clubroot resistant collections. And what I do sometimes is I will plant them into a peat-free compost or any other compost that you've got in a pot, into a 2-litre pot. So it's quite a big pot. Plant them in that until they become established, and then plant them out in the allotment. And what that does is it gives it this clean soil in that little bit of the pot that they were in. and that allows it to produce a root system which will allow it to reach almost to reach maturity, and at least you'll get some return. But I'm surprised that you're not getting better results with the resistant varieties. If you grow, I don't know whether you go in for green manuring.
Mr. Brian's, no, is it just
If you have if you're growing green manuring, don't use Caliante mustard, because Caliante mustard is related to cabbage, and it gets clubroot, and that encourages it even more. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Okay.
I'll try that for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCall.
Anyone else got any question? Oh, hang on, I saw a hand going up there. Robin Rose Christie, yeah, hang on a sec.
Hello, George. I very much enjoy the Beechgrove garden I've had. I have a skimmia bush growing in my border, and I've had it for about 10 years. And all of a sudden last year it started to go yellow, but it's at one side of it. Half of it isn't bad, the other half's quite yellow. So I started feeding it a bit more and watering it a bit more this year because it was dry. And it's dying in front of my eyes. I'm quite upset about it.
Right. How long have you had this?
10 years. 10 years.
Robin? 10 years, right. So you've enjoyed it for a while. You've enjoyed it for a while, but it's now, yeah, it's now become a great friend. So you don't want to lose it. What might be happening is it's likely running out of nutrient in the soil area where it is. So a general feed of fish blood and bone round the top and scraped in would be a good idea. But I'll tell you what also to do is to get some Epsom salts. Get some Epsom salts and scatter that just a couple of handfuls round the base of the shrub and water it in. Epsom salts, of course, has got magnesium in it, and magnesium is something which these evergreens sometimes become depleted of, and that is what gives them the good green colour. So if they're short in magnesium, then they end up being quite yellow, because magnesium is required for the formation of chlorophyll in the plant. So that's where we get the green from. So I would try that. I would try that. Okay. Sometimes, of course, when I get a plant like that, I just take my secateurs to it. But I wouldn't suggest you did that yet.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Barbara's there. Barbara?
Hang on, Barbara.
You'll need to unmute yourself, Barbara.
Silly me. Sorry, can you help me? I have a great attack of flea bites over, what's it called? Attacking my brassicas, my kale. They've virtually decimated it. I always have some, and I know that I could fleece or cover them, but it gets worse later on in the year. Yeah. And the kale plants that I had grown on to plant out at this time of year, they've just been decimated by the flea beetles.
Yeah. So this, and the damage which you get, of course, in this is all these little holes in the leaves, and it just, I mean, the plant can't survive because most of its leaves have been taken away.
Yeah.
One of the things which I remember as a student at college, when you used to be able to get a hold of these government leaflets which were on all these sorts of pests and diseases. We had great collections of those. We used to collect them almost like a stamp collector, and you would read them because you had to do this for your exams, you see. And anyway, flea beetle was one of these ones which we discovered didn't like to be disturbed. So if you can constantly hoe round about where the brassicas are, it upsets them, and they don't like to be there because they exist in the soil, and they go and they hide in the soil, and they come out at night and feed on the plant. So if you can keep hoeing, that will get rid of them. But the best thing really is to fleece, or to cover them with environ mesh or something like that. And that's why you see these fields covered in fleece where they're growing turnips, swayed turnips, and that's to keep the flea beetle away.
Right.
But it is a huge problem. Oilseed rape in Britain now, in the south. If you watch Countryfile, poor Adam in his farm at the Cotswolds was having desperate problems with flea beetle just decimating his oilseed rape. So it's because of climate change, because we're growing crops which it can eat. We never used to grow oilseed rape, and what's happening now is that they're going and they've got this great food source, and then there's no oilseed rape, so they go onto the allotments or into our gardens and they find our cabbage and they start eating those. So that's what's happening. So really, I think environmentally we would fleece and we would keep hoeing in between them. I'm sorry, that's all that I can offer.
Look, thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. I've got a question for you, George. When you talk about climate change, where do you stand on using pesticides? Are you completely non-pesticide, or?
I don't use. Well, this year I have, and last year and the year before, I have not used any chemicals in the allotment whatsoever. No chemicals at all, and I have not noticed any great change in the quality of the crops or anything like that. I put down a lot. I used a lot of fleece, environ mesh and things like that, insect-proof mesh to keep insects off the plants. It's not always successful, I have to say, because I can grow carrots under fleece and they'll be devastated by carrot root fly. So I think they're in the soil already before I get there. Or that there are eggs there from other previous crops and things like that. So I've got to be a bit more careful. I will use environmentally friendly slug pellets because I cannot stand slugs eating my hostas. Right? That kind of upsets me. And also, if I've got seedlings and you find that you've got seedlings and they start disappearing, that's usually slugs, or it will be cutworms, which do that. Cutworms are the caterpillars of moths, which they're sneaky. They can find a row of seedlings and they just go along the row, nibbling them off just below soil level. So you're watching your row of seedlings coming up, and then all of a sudden they just fall over. You hit what's that? And if you scrape around in the soil, you'll find these caterpillars. So I use a lot of biological control. That's me squeezing things with my fingers. Is really it. And the same in the glasshouse. The same in the cold glasshouse with green fly. I just rub off the green fly and things like that. So encourage ladybirds. I've got bug hotels and things like that, where I'm trying to encourage hoverflies and things of that sort.
Yeah. And are you passionate about bees, as a lot of gardeners are?
Sorry?
Passionate about bees, as a lot of gardeners are?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've been very disappointed this year that I didn't have a nest of bumblebees. I used to have a nest of early bumblebees or tree bumblebees in a bird nest box.
Yeah.
Often the queen will come and colonize that in the spring, but I didn't have one this year, which was a great disappointment. And it's been short of bees this year, and short of butterflies, and short of hoverflies.
Yeah.
It's not been as vibrant a year in the garden, and yet we've had lots of flowers, but not the same number of insects.
Yeah.
My face is all right, actually.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Gosh.
Sorry, I don't want to hog it. I've got lots of questions for you. Do you anyone else have a question for George? Could be about Beechgrove or plants. It doesn't need to be plant-based. I'd like to know, George. I'd like to know, George, when COVID hit, it was March, yeah?
Yeah.
When were you told that you had to do some filming from home and from the allotment?
Right. When it started, which was 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think, you know, we're all confused. We don't know when it seems to be going on forever. But it was 2020. Well, we had had a planning meeting in January of 2020 where we laid out our plan for the whole year. We'd sat in a room and we'd organised our planning for the whole year. And then middle of March, end off.
Yeah.
So we can't do that. Nobody can move anywhere. We're in lockdown. That's it. So what they did was, they said, we're going to send you a camera and we're going to ask you to film some stuff at home. So the camera arrived by courier, no instruction. The camera arrived by courier, and I plugged it in, got it charged up. I took it out. Everybody that was involved was asked to film a little piece and then to send it to them so that they could assess it.
Yeah.
So the first thing that Jill filmed that I did was potting up of strawberries. It was some old strawberry plants, and we were looking at them and finding the vine weevil in them and all sorts of things, and potted them up. And we sent it off to them. And the reply came back, right, we would like you to film from your garden. Because that was all that we could do. And it was very, very difficult. And if you look at your schedules, if you look at your television schedules, Beechgrove was one of the only programs, I'm saying because I'm biased, was one of the few programs that was fresh and new and didn't have the little letter R behind it in the Radio Times. No, it wasn't a repeat. It wasn't a repeat. It was something that was new, and we have soldiered on for 2 years doing that. And you know, we have to congratulate the BBC for, you know, BBC Scotland for supporting us, but also for Tern Television and Zinc, the Zinc Corporation for, you know, for all the work that they've done in the background to make it happen. You know, Jill was never given any. Well, she wasn't given any training, but we asked. The end of last year, we asked if we could get somebody round just to give her a few hints and tips. And he came round, the gentleman came round, and he had his laptop, and what he used on the laptop was the example of my brutal training, brutal pruning of the phyllo pastry tree, which legendary. I mean, this will go down in the annals of history, this one, where I, you know, really pruned this thing hard. And he looked at this and he said to Jill, now come and watch this and tell me what's wrong. And Jill couldn't see anything wrong with it. And he says, no, there isn't. Carry on doing what you're doing. And the thing is, she has an eye which tells her exactly what she wants you to see. You know, and we have great problems because we have what we describe as earnest discussions about what we should do and what we should see and things like that. And I often am at the wrong end of these conversations because I'm away miles ahead. My head's going away, you know, I'm away and my mouth's going off somewhere, and she's having trouble keeping up. So I have to slow down.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was very interesting that we were thrown in at the deep end, and not everybody was able to cope with that.
And Jill is obviously, she's an SWI member, isn't she? So
yes.
Did her filming mean that she couldn't do some normal things like baking and crafting?
That's right. Yeah. She was too involved elsewhere. Sorry. My fault again. I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing, Pauline. Yeah.
We got Aileen there.
Hello, Aileen. There you go.
Hello, George. I enjoy the Beechgrove garden, but I'm wondering if you're ever going to be going back into it. I enjoy you and your allotment, but I did enjoy the patter that you had with all the other presenters when you were up in the garden.
Right. I was up in the garden yesterday. So the last program in this current series, you might get some of the patter that you talk about, because we were all together. It was quite strange because we all had to have our 2-meter distancing and things like that. But I was there and I enjoyed it once I got started, because it's quite nerve-wracking going out into company when we have been told stay apart from people for so long. And I have to say, I was nervous about it, but we had a good time. I mean, Jill came up with me so that she could see what happens on a what is it? A professional filming day, you know, and sees all the warts and wrinkles that go with it. And it was good fun. And I did a piece with Kirsty where we had some good banter. It was a good banter with Brian and everybody. It was a jolly day. It really was. And I suppose as things get better, we will get back to that, where we will have more chat and more reacting with others, not from a distance, but face to face.
That's
Thank you.
what you need.
Thank you, Aileen. You must have had some wonderful feedback from viewers, George, over the period.
Yes, we have. There's been those that have, you know, there's always others, but I mean, I remember I was in another life, we used to liaise with colleagues at the West of Scotland College, and we would take them over to France and things like that, to take students over. And on one occasion, we had taken some members of a horticultural society with us, and I said to my colleague, I says, how are things today? He says, oh, they're fine today. And he says, everything's okay. And then the next day I says to him, how are things today?
God.
Oh, brilliant, he says. I says, now, what's the difference between yesterday and today? He says, today I had my first complaint. And as you know, George, some people are never happier than when they're complaining. So we have had, of course we've had complaints. We've had complaints because people have individual opinions about things. And I have to say that social media is one of the easiest ways of making a complaint, because you're not accountable. You know, you're not accountable. You just say it and you put it out there, and that's it. But overwhelmingly, it has been, the comments have been extremely favourable.
Great.
That's all I can say. I mean, they have been, and it's just, we can go for a walk in Portobello, walk along the prom, and we can be stopped by people that we've never seen. And these can be people from down south, from south of the border, Manchester, and places like that, who have been watching the programme, and then all of a sudden, how did they recognise people out of context? My Sunday school teacher only lived in the Sunday school. She never lived anywhere else. But then these people are able to recognise you, and it's quite scary. I can't get up to mischief.
No.
I'll be recognised.
That's wonderful. What I'm going to do now is, just before we have a vote of thanks, I'm just going to put a little poll up. So it's not a poll about you, George, it's a poll about the whole thing, so don't worry.
I could have spoiled the poll for you.
You could have said some people are never happy. Ladies, if you could fill in the poll for me, that would be wonderful. And then Jessie, am I coming back to you for a vote of thanks?
Yes.
Yes.
No, you're going to Anne.
I'm going to
Anne
Sorry.
McGee.
Yes.
Can I just say thanks to George as well, whilst everyone's filling in their forms.
Yes.
Nice to see you, George. Not seen you for a while.
Dawn. You don't
Yeah.
recognize George. Well done.
Can I just say that the question 3 doesn't cover how I found out about the meeting?
Okay, so how did you find out then?
Through the magazine.
Oh, great, great. Well, that's good.
So I also found out through Womankind. But
Yeah.
I've just ticked Facebook as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Arlene. See you there.
Yeah, I'll just put that.
I know most people's names by the voice, you see, it's great. You're the one who's complaining. Anne McGee, I'm going to add you as a spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, ladies, on your behalf, I would like to thank George very, very much indeed. We've had a wonderful evening, been taken through all the seasons in Beechgrove. I love watching Beechgrove. My husband and I often watch it together, and it has been a lovely, lovely experience seeing you in the flesh, as it were, rather than on television. But thank you very much indeed, and we very much look forward to the new programmes coming on air, and every success to the programmes, and every success to the ladies who will hopefully open their institutes and have a wonderful year and all keep safe. Thank you very much indeed, George.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If anyone would like more information on the SWI and you're not already a member, if you can put in chat, you can just put in your email address. We'll send you some information, okay? So thank you very much. Thank you very much, George. That was a great chat.
Okay, I'll just leave the meeting and let you. I'll leave it and let you get on with your business.
Okay.
Good night, ladies. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jessie. And tomorrow evening, at 2 o'clock tomorrow, folks have another talk, and tomorrow's talk will be by Sheena Norkey. And Sheena is a textile artist. She makes, and she's I've been reliably informed that by many people that she's a very good speaker as well as a very good quilter. So I think her talk will be excellent. So that's at 2. And then at 7 o'clock, we have a talk by Gary Mclean, who is one of the Scottish winners of MasterChef, the professionals. And he's opening a restaurant he's just opened a restaurant in Edinburgh. And he's a great guy. He's very, very keen on getting younger people involved in hospitality and cooking. And he's a very good chef. I've tasted some of his food. It's very nice. So so if you'd like to come along and bring any questions you might have, Gary has been primed that he's going to have some questions asked. So and Sheena, of course, will answer any questions you've got on quilting too. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed tonight.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.